Hi, everybody. All right, today we're going to talk about Chapter 4, Greek Theater. I'm breaking up Chapter 4 into two sections because I think it's a lot easier. There's a lot in Greece that happens. And Chapter 4 is about pageant theater, which is Greece and Rome and medieval theater. And I'm trying to kind of break it up a little bit so it's a little bit easier to digest. So first, we're going to talk about Greek theater. And let me share my screen with you. Okay, good. Let me close that. Thank you. Let's present. All right, Chapter 4, Greek theater. It's all Greek to me. So the first thing I'd like you to do, if you have time, is to go watch the Crash Course Theater. This video, we're not going to watch it here during this lecture, but you can go and you can see it, and it's actually in your modules under Crash Course videos. So it tells you a lot about the Greek theater, and I just love the way the guy does it. So he does it good, and he covers a lot of the things. And then when you hear some of them from me again, it sounds familiar and you'll understand it a little bit better. Okay, so first of all, Dionysus. When the Greeks did plays, they celebrated the gods. And the god of theater is Dionysus. So he is known as the Greek god of theater, wine, and fertility. So these festivals took place during the springtime, so during fertility events, excuse me, but also he's the god of wine. So wine makes people loose and happy. And so there was a lot of wine at these festivals. And you need to know that Dionysus is the god that they were doing the festivals for and in honor of. They did it at a festival called City Dionysia, because again, in reference to Dionysus. And this was a major festival in Athens. And the theater is also, I believe, called the City Dionysia. But it was the festival for sure. And this is the theater in Athens. You can see it seats a lot of people. So everybody in Athens was required to come and see these shows and participate in this festival. The first actor that we have documented as an actor, we call him Thespis. I don't know if that was really his name or not, but that's what we're going with. That's what everyone goes with. It's where we get the word thespian from. So if you were in high school and you were in a thespian department or you heard about the Thespian Society, it's named after Thespis. And what happened was there were a group of chorus people. That's what they usually did before. They had dithyrambs, which were like a whole bunch of people speaking in unison, because you got to be pretty loud for, 15, 20,000 people to hear you. Excuse me. And Thespis was the first one that wanted to act. So he stepped out of the group and spoke by himself. And that was the first time anyone had done that. We have documented. And Thespis is known as the first actor. Okay, when they did these festivals, each festival was presented with 3 tragedies and 1 satyr play. And the satyr play was comic and it was lewd and really kind of raunchy. They included people with a lot of big phalluses, fake penises that were just enormous. And everybody just thought that was so funny. Okay. Now, we do have some records of ancient Egyptian theater that they did theater as well, even before we have Greek. But they also did reenactments of myths and of gods, especially the god Osiris. So we do have some record of that, even though we really kind of recognize the Greek theater as the most robust. It's the one we have the most information on. Okay, this satyr plays. And yes, these are replicas of costumes that they would have worn. They would have worn masks and beards and these enormous things. So the satyr plays were short. Again, there were 3 tragedies and then a satyr play. And again, it was kind of comic relief. They were comic or they were satire, and they poked fun at the Greek myths. So everything that everyone was taking seriously in the tragedies, then they made fun of. And again, they followed the tragedies. They were after the tragedies were over, everybody wanted to go home feeling good, in good spirits, not real down because you'd just seen a bunch of tragedies. So that's why they had the satyr plays there. Okay, we have 3 surviving Greek dramatists. No, they haven't survived, but their plays have. We actually have three drama tragedy playwrights, and then we have 1 comic playwright that we have plays for. So Aeschylus is the first one. Sophocles is the second one, and he's the one that wrote Oedipus Rex, which is what you're supposed to read for this particular section. And Euripides. Okay, so you can see where their dates are. They were all around in the 5th century BC. And these are the 3 major playwrights, dramatists, known for writing tragedy: Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides. All right, in the theater of Dionysus, where the plays were performed, it was completed in the 4th century BC, and it seated up to 17,000 spectators. It was enormous. I believe this is a picture of it. The word theatron means seeing place, so you're going to need to know that. And it's the slope where everybody sat. So when you're going to the theater, the thing it's where we get our word for theater is from theatron. It means the place where you sit, not necessarily the stage. So theatron means seeing place. It's the slope without the seating was there first. Then they, put in the steps and the seats and stuff like that. But again, you need to know that was the origin of the word theater and that it means seeing place. It's where you sat to see the play. Oh, this is the theater. Yeah, my little arrows. I'm like, what is that? Okay. This is kind of what the setup was. The seating place is the theatron. Where the actors acted was called the orchestra. The backdrop behind them was called the skene. And the sides where the chorus would parade in, that's how I remember this, are called the parados. And those are the areas on the side where they would enter and exit. It's called the parados. Think parade. Okay, they would parade in, and that's where the actors would enter and exit. Okay, so this is what survives of one of the skene in a Greek theater in Turkey at Perin. This area here that is circled in yellow, that's the backdrop. That's what a skene looks like. It's the stage building. It's where the actors would go to change masks or costumes, or when somebody died on stage, it's where they'd take the body, that kind of thing. So you didn't want to, stand up and walk off stage because it would kind of break the illusion. So skene means hut or tent, and it's the origin of our word for scene. Scene, scenery, skene. Okay. Oh, that's a little ground plan. Deus ex machina. This particular term means God from the machine. So a machina is a machine. Deus means God. So Deus ex machina is God from the machine. And what would happen was there would be a play, and the writers couldn't really come up with a good ending on how to solve the play. So they would have a god descend to the people and solve all their problems. And that was it. And so there are many plays now, this term is referenced to mean anytime a writer kind of writes themselves into a corner and doesn't really have a good way to end the play. And so they just throw something in, like a god comes in and saves everyone. I think of all those plays and movies where the person wakes up and, oh, it was just a dream. So you have all these horrible things that happen and there's really no way that they can end it. So the person wakes up and says, oh, it was just a dream. Okay, so I think of the Wizard of Oz. So Dorothy gets flung away to this far off place and can't get home and can't get home. And oh, she's had the ability to go home the whole time because it's really just a dream. They don't really show you how she gets home or what it is. She wakes up and it's a dream. So that's to me, I mean, it's a little more than that, but that's kind of what a Deus ex machina is. A god comes down, solves all their problems, or a king comes in, takes care of everything. That's what we call a Deus ex machina today, is a contrived ending. But Deus Ex Machina literally meant God from the machine, and they had these machines that would lower the gods down and take care of all the problems. So you will need to know that. Here's another pictures of a Deus Ex Machina, and what this is a recreation of the big crane found at the Valley of Temples in Sicily. That's a pretty enormous crane to lower somebody down for this kind of thing. But you can see this picture back here where it has there's 3 or 4 people pulling on the crane to lower the god down for the play. People took, theater very, very personally, and it was important back then. So they created the, this illusion of this god descending. Okay. There are 4 categories of Greek performances. Of Greek performers. There are the actors, right? They're the guys that come out and change masks, and usually there are 3 actors in a Greek play. And those 3 actors play all the characters. So they would have to go backstage and change their masks and come out as someone different. There is the chorus. So there was always a chorus of people around them, usually between 12 and 15 people, that were indicative of either the townspeople, or they were kind of a pseudo representative of an audience, so that they understood things and they explained things to the audience that they understood at that time, so that we would follow along with them. They also had supernumeraries, which were basically the extras of the time. They didn't have any lines. They weren't supposed to sing with the chorus. They were supposed to just kind of come on stage. They were the guys in the background, holding the spears or whatever. And they were like background players, what we would call extras right now in film. So they were the extras. They were the supernumeraries, and sometimes they're called the supers. You'll hear that term every once in a while. Musicians, they were the other performer. There were always musicians on stage. There was music with every Greek drama. There was a flute player usually, and he played throughout, because a lot of the times the chorus sung their lines. They sung them in unison so that people would understand the story. There was a lot of music that went along with it. It wasn't just very bland and straightforward. It was a big show of entertainment. All right, let's talk about the actors. So there were only 3 were permitted to perform in each play. They could take on several roles with the use of their masks. The same 3 actors appeared in all 3 plays whenever they did, because remember I told you in the festivals they did 3 tragedies and then a satyr play. So the 3 tragedies, the same 3 actors played the major roles in all 3 of those tragedies that were kind of linked together. And then the principal actor was assigned by a lottery to the playwright. So we had these famous actors, people who loved these actors, but and the townspeople were in charge of these plays, and everybody was very proud of them. But of course, everybody wanted the best actors. And so they actually had a lottery in town, and they would assign actors. They'd draw the lots. Okay, like the NBA picks, right? Okay, you get first pick. Who do you want? You get second pick. Who do you want? Or maybe it was like, you get, Brad Pitt or whatever. I don't know. You get Dwayne Johnson. You get Jennifer Aniston. Whatever. They were all male, so there's that. And yes, the men played the female roles as well. They just used masks. So the supernumeraries, the supers, the extras. These were the extras. They may or may not wear masks, but they were not allowed to speak any lines. They were just kind of on stage, again, like I said, as background. The Greek chorus. In tragedy, it consisted of 15 men, and a playwright had to apply to the principal government in order to be granted a chorus. So the choruses were also assigned to different people. And the chorus could look many different ways. Sometimes they wore masks, sometimes they didn't, depended on the play. But there were a lot of masks going on though. Okay, the Corrigus. Plural for this is Corrigoi. And this is the person who had the money. They were the producer. They were a wealthy citizen that were assigned to a playwright by the government. So there's this playwright who is going to write 3 tragedies, and he was assigned to a Corrigos, and the Corrigos had to pay for them to rehearse all year long. The Corrigos paid for the chorus and for the playwright and for the flute player and any of the masks. They basically were the money for the thing. They were required to pay for all the training and all the costumes of all the performers and all the actors and all the musicians. And this was their civic duty. So obviously the Corrigos, they'd choose the wealthiest people in the city. And then it became a pride thing too, that was their playwright, those were their folks, because it was a festival and it was a contest. So there was a lot of bragging rights within the contest. I'm not sure if there were prizes, there probably were, but there was definitely bragging rights. So the chorus was assigned to the playwright and the Corrigos 11 months before the performance. So they'd do a performance, everybody would rest for a little bit, and then you'd start on the next one. So you worked for 11 months, you performed it on the 12th. Then you worked for another 11 months and you performed it on the 12th. They trained in singing and in dancing, much like opera singers and dancers train today. And there was a chorus leader. So one person in the chorus kind of was the leader of the chorus. Sometimes they'd have some special lines that were, almost on their own, or they would lead a separate part of the group. When you read Oedipus Rex, the part of the priest is, I believe, one of the chorus members, usually. And sometimes they would divide up the chorus. There was a semi-chorus of only 7 members. Okay, most of the time it was 15, but sometimes they'd break them up in half. Okay, the functions, I don't want that to cover what you're seeing. The functions of the chorus in Greek drama, what did they do? Not coming. There we go. They formed a collective character, like I said, who expressed the opinions, gave advice, and occasionally threatened to interfere in the actions of what was going on in the play. They seem to usually express the author's point of view, and again, sometimes the audience's point of view. If the audience was questioning something, the chorus questioned it with them to kind of lead them along. See, come up. They served as kind of the ideal spectator. They reacted the way the author wanted the audience to react, so kind of leading them along. They helped establish the mood and heighten dramatic effects. Come on. They added color, movement, and spectacle as the chorus sang and danced in the choral interludes. They were, entertainment, like I said. The flute player, really important dude. Played sort of a double flute. As you can see here, it kind of has 2 windpipes coming out of it. I think you blow in the same place, but it gave different notes no matter what you did. He remained on stage during the entire show, and audiences just kind of ignored him. It's like the musicians were there in the background. He was always in the view of the audience. And he wore special sandals with a clapper on one sole so that he could keep time while he was playing. And he composed all of his own music. So the flute player, again, was also assigned to the Corrigos and the playwright and the chorus so that they could all rehearse together. All right, the satyr plays. So the only surviving satyr play that we actually have is Cyclops by Euripides. And it's, again, it's funny, it's goofy, and they wore enormous phalluses. Okay, masks. The role of masks in Greek theater is very important. All performers except the musician wore masks. So I guess the chorus did mostly wear masks. And I guess the supers wore masks too. They were usually made of lightweight wood, cork, or linen. They actually attached real human hair to these things, so they probably looked pretty um, gross or lifelike. I'm not sure which. They facilitated the rapid change of roles. When three actors had to play all the parts, they had to go off stage and change a mask and come out and be someone else. It was really easy. They didn't have to change full costumes or makeup or do their hair different or anything. They just put on a different mask and they were a different person. It made it easier also for men to play women's roles because, again, women were not allowed to be in these shows. They had to be home doing the cooking, I guess. It helped the actors assume roles that varied in age too. They might be playing a really young person, and then they have to come back and play an old person, and the masks helped with that as well. They assisted the communication with the audience by emphasizing the most important qualities of each character. So, if the character was supposed to be really happy, you might have a really smiley mask. If the character was supposed to be upset, it might have an upset expression on its face. And so the audience could see. And also, the audience could see the mask much better than they could someone's facial expression when there's 20,000 people there and it's really far away. I have heard it said that sometimes these masks actually had kind of a little megaphone installed by the mouthpiece, so it would like magnify their voice when they talked as well. So that kind of helped them out with everybody hearing what they were going to say. The Greek costumes and footwear. So they wore a chiton, okay, which is kind of this, what we might call a toga, right? So the chiton outfit. They had what they called cathorni, which were platform shoes. And basically it made them taller so people could see them on stage. And sometimes you see over here to the right side, they're wearing cathorni with elevated shoes. And sometimes they were taller than others because they really wanted to stand out on stage and be tall so that everybody could see them. Let's see, Greek theatrical conventions. So we talked about conventions in the first couple of chapters about how well we go and we sit down and they dim the lights. We know the play is going to start. And that's one of our conventions that we understand. When you see people in black moving things around on the stage, we know we're not supposed to see them, that they're not part of the play. So that's another one of our conventions. So what were the Greek theatrical conventions? Well, there was a group of performers formed called a chorus, and that was expected. One actor often played several roles within a play, again with the use of masks. Men played both male and female roles. Performers wore masks and character appropriate dress. And then the performers sang and chanted and danced much of the text. So some of it was spoken probably by the actors, but most likely the chorus members sang and danced most of what they were doing. And the scale of the theater prevented small details from being seen. So everything had to be really big, really exaggerated, so people would know what was going on. You couldn't do anything subtly. And you certainly couldn't whisper to someone on stage or anything like that. It had to be really big movements. Okay, a dithyramb. A dithyramb was actually a form of entertainment. It was a choral hymn, and it was sung by 50 men or boys under the leadership of an exarchon to honor Dionysus. So the theater that we know now kind of came out of a birth of dithyrambs. The dithyramb was there first. And again, we got a whole bunch of people together and we were singing and chanting in honor of Dionysus. And so it became a feature of the Greek tragedy. The Greek tragedy took the dithyramb and put it into the tragedy and made it part of the show. And it's considered by Aristotle to be the origin of Greek tragedy, and passing first through a satiric phase. So I guess they did some satire with it as well. Okay, Greek comedy. So Greek comedy also began in city Dionysia. So the city Dionysian festival, but then it moved the festival to Lanaya. I'm saying these things right. At the festival in Lanaya, only 5 plays were presented at each comic festival. In City Dionysia, there were, I think, 4 or 5 groups of 3 tragedies and a satyr play, 3 tragedies and a satyr play, 3 tragedies and a satyr play. So it took place over several days because they had to act when the daylight was. They didn't have lighting. In Lanaya, or Lenia, Lanaya, I'm going to say Lanaya, only 5 plays were presented completely at the whole festival. The chorus members consisted of 24 members. So if the Greek chorus has 15, then in a comic chorus, you have even more. You have 24 members. So a lot of people in the Greek comedies. The costumes many times consisted of very tight, too short chiton over flesh-colored tights, so they all looked half naked. And they also wore exaggerated phalluses because it was a festival of fertility. So, yeah. So, who's the only comic Greek playwright whose plays have survived? Aristophanes. And Aristophanes wrote Lysistrata. The oldest known Greek comedy is called the Achaeans. It's also written by Aristophanes, and it's about an Athenian who signs a peace treaty with Sparta by himself. So he's the only one that goes there to Sparta and is like, hey, we're going to make peace, okay? Nobody else in Athens knows that he's doing this, so of course it ends up being a comedy of errors and all that kind of stuff. Lysistrata, the reason I have this up here is I was actually in Lysistrata, and Lysistrata, when I was in college, is a very funny play. All the women get really fed up with the men fighting all the time. They're never home. They're always out fighting. They're always fighting with each other. And would the men just stop fighting? So the women from the 2 cities, probably Athens and Sparta, I'm not sure. I don't remember, but get together and they're like, look, we're tired of our men fighting all the time. We don't want to fight all the time. Let's make a deal. We won't have sex with any of our husbands until they stop fighting. So that's what the women do in both places. They stop having sex with all their husbands. They act sexy and kind of tease them and lead them on, but they won't have any sex with them until they stop fighting. And guess what the men do? They stop fighting. So, this is what I'm telling you about, but I wanted to let you know about Lysistrata. It's one of the oldest comedies, and it's about women who withhold sex in order to get the men to stop fighting in the war. It's actually very funny, and people still perform it today. Okay, Greek comedy typical features. All right, there's usually a prologue that starts everything off, and this is the happy idea of what they want to happen. So the women saying, we want our men to stop fighting. That's the happy idea. The Greek comedy typical features, they still use the same Greek theater. They use the parados a lot to come in and out. I'm not sure why this is like that. During the Greek comedy, there is then, so we have the happy idea come out, and then we have an agon, which is the debate over the merits of the happy idea, ending in its adoption. So the happy idea that the woman has is let's stop having sex. Then with our husbands, then the women meet and they have an agon, which is the debate. Should we do this? Should we do this? Should we do this? Should we do this? And then we all of a sudden adopt, yes, we're going to adopt this happy idea. So they debate about it and then they go ahead and decide to start doing it. Then there's a parabasis, which is a choral passage addressed to the audience, usually giving advice on civil problems. So then, the chorus comes and they talk about, yeah, we should all stop fighting. Wouldn't that be good? It would be good if we didn't fight anymore. So it's about some civil problem that's going on, and the chorus takes over and is addressing this to the crowd. Okay, and then there's a series of episodes showing the happy idea in practice. So when we did Lysistrata, I got to be one of the wives who was, leading the husband on, and oh yeah, but first I need this, and okay, now I need a pillow, and blah 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 blah, and well now I need this before I can, and he was like, so it was very funny. Um, but so they have a series of vignettes, a series of episodes showing this idea actually being practiced and how it's working. Um, and then there's usually a komos, which is an exit and an ending to feasting and revelry, and everybody's agreed, and then everybody's happy, and they all live happily ever after. That's your typical comedy. Okay, now let's talk about Oedipus Rex. I need a sip of my coffee. So, the themes of Oedipus Rex. Infanticide. So Oedipus's parents tried to kill him. So that's a problem. Incest, he marries his mother. Patricide, he kills his father. The fall of being great to being low. The uncertainty of destiny, or whether or not you can change your destiny. And the limited ability of human beings to control their fate. I want to go back a second. So let's talk a little bit about Oedipus Rex. The story, basically, everybody knew the story before they ever saw the play. Everyone knew this story. And people ask, well, why would they want to go see a story that they already knew the ending to? Why do we go see a new Batman when it comes out? We already know what happens. We know, the backstory most of the time, but we want to see how it's treated, how it's different. What do they show? What do they not show? So in this particular story, in Oedipus Rex by Sophocles, it starts out after a lot of the action has already happened. And you don't find out until through the play all the backstory and what has gone on. So remember, we talked about a point of attack. So the point of attack is very late in Oedipus Rex, Oedipus the king. His parents, so before the play, way before the play, his parents were told that this child, this baby that they just had, was going to kill his father and marry his mother. And like all good kings at the time, Laos, his father, said, oh, we're not going to keep this baby. And so instructed their servant to take this baby and bind his heels together. And I don't remember what Oedipus means, but it's something to do with binding his heels together, basically so he couldn't crawl away, and to leave him on the mountainside, I guess to die of exposure or eaten by lions or something. Well, the servant feels really bad. He doesn't want to leave this poor baby out on this side of the hillside. So as he's going out to the hillside, he sees another shepherd friend of his. And he asks this other shepherd, hey, do you know anybody who would take this baby? Because, I have this baby here and I don't, I kind of have no place for it. And the guy says, well, actually, yes. My king and queen, back in Corinth, I believe, they don't have children and they would really love a child. So he takes the baby and brings it back there, and the baby is raised there. Somebody at some point in a brawl tells Oedipus that he's illegitimate, that he's not the son of his father and mother. And he gets really upset, but he decides he's going to go to an oracle, a soothsayer, and find out. So he goes to the oracle, who says to him, you will kill your father and marry your mother. And he says, no way. Doesn't really tell him whether he's their son or not, right? Says, no way. I'm going to get as far away from my mother and father as I can. So he leaves, he goes on, and remember, he's the son of a king, so like he's a prince, so he believes he's entitled to a lot of things, but he leaves by himself. On his way, Laos, who is his real father, but he doesn't know he's his real father, is coming from Thebes, and they meet at a crossroads, and neither one of them will move. So it's like, move aside, I'm coming through. No, you move aside, I'm coming through. Because remember, they're both royalty. So there's a little road rage incident. They pull out their swords, and ta-da, Oedipus kills Laios. Not knowing that he was a king, not knowing anything about him. And there's only one guy in their group or whatever that gets away. So one servant got away. So one guy out there knows this, right? Doesn't know who Oedipus is at the time, but knows this. Oedipus goes on, gets to Thebes. When he gets to Thebes, there is this chaos going on. Like there's a horrible curse on the country. There's a plague, all because of the Sphinx. And the Sphinx was an evil beast. And the only way that you could stop this from going on was to answer the Sphinx's riddle. And many people had tried and died, whatever. Oedipus decides he's going to try. And the riddle, you might have heard of it before, but the riddle is, what walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs in the afternoon, and 3 legs in the evening? And the answer is man, a person, because they crawl when they're born, they walk on 2 legs when they're an adult, and then when they get older, they use a cane or a walking stick. So it's 3 legs to help them walk. The Sphinx says, fine, you won. The plague is lifted. Everybody in Thebes is so happy, and they don't know what happened to their king, but he's gone. So, hey, why don't you become the king? And since you're the king, you get to marry the queen that's here, who he doesn't know is his mother, Jocasta. I guess age difference wasn't a thing back then. They have 4 children together. All of that takes place before this ever even starts. When the play starts, Thebes is going through another plague, and they don't know how to stop it. And so Oedipus comes out and he tells the people, I know you're going through this. It's a terrible thing. I've sent the queen's brother, Creon, my brother-in-law, to the oracle, again, these oracle things, to the oracle to find out exactly what's going on and how we lift this plague. Creon comes back and says, I found out how to lift the plague. And Oedipus is like, great, whatever it is, we'll do it. He says, well, the king that was here before you, Oedipus, his name was Laus. And Oedipus says, yes, I know, I've heard of him. And he says, well, he was killed. He was murdered. And he's like, well, that's terrible. And he said, and as long as his murderer is still out there, we're still going to have the plague. The murderer has never been brought to justice. So Oedipus decides, well, we're going to get to the bottom of this. We are going to take care of this murderer. Does anybody know what happened? Why didn't you all take care of this back then? And basically Creon says, well, we kind of had the Sphinx thing going on, and so everybody was real busy with that, and then you came, and then life went on. And he's like, okay, yeah, I remember all that. Well, let's get to the bottom of it now. Who knows about this? And the chorus says, hey, there's this soothsayer named Tiresias. He's blind, but he sure knows a lot of things, and he might be able to tell you. So they go get Tiresias, and Tiresias comes there in the middle of them. And Tiresias knows what the deal is, but Tiresias does not want to say. Oedipus is like, tell me what you know. And Tiresias is like, no, I don't think I will. And he's like, you have to tell me. And he's like, no, I really don't. And as a matter of fact, you should probably just leave well enough alone and don't say anything. And they argue, and Oedipus gets really mad and threatens him and says, you know, if you weren't blind, I would say you did it. And Tiresias gets really mad and he says, okay, you want to know? You are the murderer of which you seek. And Oedipus says, okay, now I know you're lying. And he's like, I'm not lying. He says, I bet you conspired with Creon, because Creon wants to take my place and Creon wants to be the king. Creon, his brother-in-law. And so they take Tiresias away, or he goes away, and Creon comes back. And then there's a big fight with Creon. And Creon says, okay, think about this, dude. I live in the castle. I live in the palace. I am the brother of the queen. I can go anywhere I want. I can do anything I want. I can get anything I want. I have servants. I have people. Why would I want also the headache of ruling that you have. Right now, I get all the benefits without having any of the headaches. You have all the headaches of having to rule and having to make decisions. Why would I do that? And as they're arguing, Jocasta comes out, separates them, tells Creon to go away, and asks Oedipus what's wrong. Oedipus says, oh, this soothsayer came and said, that this, and she says, you know what? Soothsayers are dumb. You shouldn't believe soothsayers. As a matter of fact, you know what happened to me when I had a baby, and they said that that baby was going to come back and kill his father and marry his mother. And we all know that, that hasn't happened. And he died by some highwayman, killing him on the side of the road. And Oedipus says, wait a minute, where was this road? Meanwhile, some other servant comes in and says, oh, Oedipus, we have some bad news for you. Your father in Corinth has died. And he's like, oh, well, that's sad. I know he was old. I'm glad he's, not in pain anymore, but it's kind of a relief because, I was supposed to, kill him. I mean, this is what he's thinking in his mind. And he's like, oh, it's very sad that, my father has died. And he says, well, don't be too sad because he wasn't really your father. And Oedipus is like, say what? He's like, yeah, you came to him as a baby. You weren't really, there's no way you would have ever killed him, because you weren't really his son. So that would have never happened. You wouldn't have killed him. And it all starts clicking, right? And he asked Jocasta, okay, who would have known about this baby that you gave away? And she's like, well, I did have a messenger, the person that took the baby away. So they call him. He's scared shitless, right? He comes in and he's like, yeah, I did give the baby away. And he's like, who'd you give the baby to? And it happens to be that same messenger. And he's like, yeah, don't you remember you gave the baby to me and I took him away? And so everything kind of comes out. Jocasta realizes, oh my God, I've married my son and had 4 children with him. She goes in, takes her own garments and hangs herself, right? We don't see this. This is all, they didn't want anything bad to happen on stage. So this all happens off stage. Oedipus goes back, sees her, screams, then takes the pins, the brooches that were holding up her chiton, whatever, takes them off and gouges out his own eyes. Because it's too cowardly to completely kill himself. So when he comes out on stage, his eyes are all bloody. This is the picture that you see. His eyes are all bloody and gouged out. And he tells Creon, look, my sons are old enough to take care of themselves, but please take care of my daughters. And the 2 little girls come out and hug him or whatever. And he's like, let me stay with them a little bit longer. And Creon's like, you're no longer in charge here. So no. And as a matter of fact, you're banished. So thus ends the tragedy of Oedipus Rex. So infanticide, his parents try to kill him. Incest, he marries his mother. Patricide, kills his father. The fall of being great, he's a great king, to being low. The uncertainty of destiny, and can you really run away from your fate? They said in the beginning he was going to kill his father and marry his mother, and he did. So here are a couple, if you look on here, there's a couple of little sections. You can look at some of the videos that I put on there, some of the videos of Oedipus, and see kind of what it should. This modern one here, it's set in modern times, like in the 1920s or something like that, and it's made into a musical, much the way the Greeks would have made theirs into a musical. So these are pretty good if you want to take a look at them. Okay, in Oedipus Rex, what happens in the first choral song? They're carrying branches. They tell Oedipus that Thebes is suffering from the plague. Okay, in the beginning, they're mourning because another plague has hit their city. What crime does Oedipus agree should be avenged? The murder of King Laus. What does Jocasta tell and the chorus tell Oedipus he should do in the second episode? They tell Oedipus to let his anger cool down. This is when, after he's had the argument with Creon, they're like, you need to just cool off. You need to not be upset. Um, who do we find out brought Oedipus to Polybus as an infant? Oh, it was the messenger from Corinth, the same one that brings the news to Oedipus that his father in Corinth has died. What happens to Jocasta and Oedipus, respectively, offstage? Jocasta hangs herself, and Oedipus gouges out his eyes with her brooch. And why do acts of extreme violence take place off stage in a Greek tragedy? So the Greek sensibilities dictated that the acts of extreme violence take place off stage. It's also easier to stage. So they didn't want to see horrible, horrible things right there in front of them, but they could see the aftermath of them. Also, if they had to stage and do tricks right now, of somebody hanging himself and not really hanging themselves and gouging out their eyes, it was easier to come out with it already gouged out. And how many performers were probably in the original cast of Oedipus Rex? Including 3 actors, 15 chorus, musicians, and supernumeraries, including the children who come out in the last scene. They don't have any lines. They're Antigone and Ismay. Probably no fewer than 35. There were probably at least 35 actors in the cast. So it was a pretty big cast. It was a pretty big show to put on. And again, this was one of 3 that they did, 3 tragedies in a row. So it was a big, big show. Ta-da! So that's the end of Greek theater right now. I'm going to stop right here. And that's the end. I think that I've divided this up into different mods. So if you want to go ahead and take the quiz on Greek theater, this is where I'm going to stop. And I'm going to do another one on the rest of chapter 4. So I hope you all have a great day.